I want you to ask yourself, what is your favorite video game soundtrack? Now I want to ask one more question. Which indie game soundtrack did you pick? It's hard to put a pin on the exact date that all major releases began to sound the same. But at some point, I feel as if these games began using music as something to fill space more than anything else. It's like somewhere along the line, soundtracks lost their personality. All of the orchestral sounds began to blend into one indistinguishable noise. It's not that the music is bad, it's just that it's safe. It exists to complement the gameplay, but can't support its own weight alone. But while this was happening in the AAA world during the early 2000s, there was another player on the rise, building more and more of a name for themselves with each new release. The indie game industry. These low-budget passion projects were producing musical hit after hit with their world-building soundtracks that didn't just exist for the reason of filling silence. There are so many things that make games like Terraria, Hollow Knight, and Undertale amazing gaming experiences, but the most important thing to me after gameplay is the music. The soundtracks to these games are iconic, not because they are presented to the listener alongside an awesome gaming experience, but because they do such a good job of pulling you into their world. It doesn't matter where you are in the real world, in school, at work, on the bus, or in the car. Once you hear that silly Terraria cave music, there you are, underground, searching for treasures for your next boss fight. I've got so many great memories of gaming with my friends, staying up all night, laughing, talking, building, and exploring. And do you know what was always playing in the background of all those memories? It doesn't feel like the soundtrack was made for the game. It feels like the game was made around the iconic music. It fits so good, not because the music sounds perfectly engineered and polished, but because it shows character and soul, something that gets lost so easily when producing a massive title. But where exactly does this shift between small and large studios occur? Well, I'd like to draw attention to 4 main points. The first of which is something I want to call game versus player direction. When you're playing a story game like Uncharted or God of War, for example, you are hardly in control of the experience that you make for yourself. Besides a few personal struggles with a specific boss or puzzle, most people's experience with games like this are almost identical. I think the trend for so many AAA games is to play like movies. They trap you into a linear story, not an individual experience. As the player of these games, you are not in control of what is going on in the game, you're only along for the ride as a witness. All of the music has been carefully curated for the exact moment the player is experiencing. The sound doesn't set the tone, it reflects it. It's much harder to notice the music of a game like this when the sole purpose of said music is to complement the scene it's paired with. It's perfectly crafted to elevate the cinematic experience, but rarely steps out of that role. AAA soundtracks tend to exist in service of immersion, carefully placed in the background so as not to distract from the visuals or voice acting. The result? Music that feels polished and powerful, but also strangely interchangeable. I think there are so many instances between games where you could exchange soundtracks in between them, and most players wouldn't even notice. The level of professionalism these composers can reach is certainly impressive, and it's hard to critique a composer for following the instructions given to them. They create a set that fits perfectly into the game they were hired to cover, but in doing so they lose identity. It's also hard to blame the studio in charge, as there will always be a demand for large cinematic video games. Maybe there isn't anyone directly at fault, and the only problems come from demanding these sorts of games. When following a cinematic formula, it only makes sense that the outcome is a formulaic soundtrack. On the other hand, you have original soundtracks from smaller games that aren't afraid to take the lead. The music in these games challenge and redirect your emotions in lieu of reinforcing them. The best example of this can be found in one of my favorite games of all time, Risk of Rain 2. While you're listening, I encourage you to pay careful attention to the way that this track guides your emotions. I know it's difficult to capture the track's full feel in just 30 seconds, but what I want to highlight is how it balances the level of impact it has on the player. The majority of the track's runtime is spent playing mellow background music, the same type of music that I frown upon in other games. But what makes the song different is what happens right around the 2-minute mark, where it does a complete 180. That iconic guitar riff comes out of nowhere, completely taking control of the player's experience. Having this balance between relaxation and action gives the players a chance to experience everything else that's great about Risk of Rain. And then right when the player's mind starts to wander, the music sucks them right back into the fight. The key here is that the music sets the tone, leading to a complete gaming experience that tends to get lost when the music is just used as an accessory. Before we continue, I want to address the biggest discrepancy between AAA franchises and the indie game world. That of course being the budget. When companies like Naughty Dog spend over $200 million to create a game, it can feel impossible for smaller games to compete. And yet, they do. Amazingly, solo creators and small teams can stand toe-to-toe with these behemoth game studios with hundreds of employees. When dealing with a medium that is so subjective, I think the worst thing that you can do is aim for perfection. Though there are plenty of games out there that were able to create beautiful music by shelling out cash, money isn't what makes the music good, it's the intention behind it. The most exciting part of the gaming industry is that unknown musicians can stand alongside the most accomplished artists by being intentional with their work. An example of a larger game with iconic music is Destiny, which was made by Paul McCartney. Wait, that can't be right. Oh wow, look at that. And alongside 106 other musicians. But do you know what other game has a soundtrack with the same amazing quality? Cuphead. And that was only a dozen guys in a remodeled janitor's closet messing around with different instruments and seeing what worked. But yet another example is Minecraft, and that was just one guy in his mother's basement making the most recognized gaming soundtrack in history. The monetary price of these soundtracks couldn't be any more dissimilar, yet the value they bring to the gaming experience is almost equally impactful. The next point I want to touch on is creative freedom. It shouldn't come as a surprise that smaller games have more freedom to take risks. When Activision, EA, or Nintendo want to create a new video game, they are forced into an awkward position where they need to value revenue over creative vision due to their shareholders. This can also lead to rushed projects that release unfinished or broken, but that's a conversation for another day. What this means for musical direction is that major studios often choose to rely on a proven formula for producing a good enough soundtrack, rather than taking creative risks that might result in a truly standout one. This differs massively when you look into the production process of a smaller game. These games are often passion projects built by a small team, or even a single creator. The entire product is a leap of faith, so when it comes time to craft the soundtrack, these developers don't treat it as a liability, but as an opportunity to soar. Their music reflects the personal risk and investment poured into the project. The soundtrack becomes a way to elevate the game's experience, giving creators yet another tool to project their vision and creativity. But at the end of the day, maybe the differences between these two gaming worlds can be summarized into one key idea: identity. At their core, indie games are much smaller in nature and therefore need to turn to other mediums like music to differentiate themselves from the rest. These games are often heavily limited by the ability of their developers, and the result of this is an experience that can seem lackluster when compared to the franchise giants they're competing against for players. These games are rarely released with any expectations, or even anyone knowing about their existence at all. Sound design helps level this playing field, as someone with less musical experience can compete with multi-million-dollar sets, given they have the creativity and determination to do so. When you couple this with the creative freedom I mentioned earlier, it's no wonder these games have produced such amazing soundtracks. The simplicity of many indie titles might play a role as well. Immersion isn't always a top priority in platformers or puzzles. Sometimes I just want to hear some kick-ass music while I'm discovering the world around me. I really want to end this video by clarifying that I don't think large game studios have become incapable of making great music. There are countless examples of large studios making breathtaking soundtracks that I consider perfect. When I hear the menu theme from Halo 4 or Black Ops 1, I'm instantly pulled back into my childhood, back into the warmth of those memories in that era of gaming. When I hear newer masterpieces like Red Dead 2 and Elden Ring, I'm hopeful that kids today will grow up with the same kind of nostalgia I feel for my favorites. But that's exactly why the shift in modern AAA soundtracks hurts a little. These studios can deliver unforgettable music, they've proven it. Yet so often they play it safe, smoothing out the personality and edge that once made their soundtracks iconic. The charm is still there, buried somewhere beneath the cinematic polish, and I just hope one day the industry finds the courage to let that spark shine again.